I had lived in that old villa for many years, where every footstep echoed the same way, just like my life, until that late autumn morning. When Noah, my ex-husband's son, reached out and fashioned an Italian silver necklace around my neck, then whispered by my ear, if we had met under different circumstances, would things feel this complicated? From that moment on, I knew I was standing before a door that, once opened, could never be closed the same way again. Have you ever felt your heart waver beneath a gaze you knew you should never return? Autumn in Tuscany always arrives late and leaves quietly. In the pale morning light of late November, the sky drifted slowly, as if it too was reluctant to part with the season of the final leaves. The vineyard rows out front had already shed all their foliage, leaving only bare, twisted branches, tangled like overlapping memories. Eleanor stood by the old glass door, holding a cooled espresso cup in hand, silently watching the weak sunlight filter through the pine branches. In the light mist, the old stone house nestled between sloping hills, surrounded by harvested vineyards and moss-covered stone walls. Everything was so peaceful, it could take one's breath away. She had lived here for over 10 years, since the day Thomas brought her home as his wife and then left her with his son only to disappear like the first cold wind of the season. Noah had only been a thin, quiet child then, with a shadowed gaze. He grew up alongside Eleanor, bound not by blood, but by the silent sharing of absence of the man who had once been the center of both their lives. Footsteps echoed from the mezzanine, soft, like a habit too familiar to be noticed. Noah appeared at the bottom step, a camera dangling from his neck. His brown hair tousled from sleep, and the deep gray sweater accentuated his bright eyes and cheeks flushed pink from the cold. "Good morning, Mom." His voice was husky, paired with a gentle smile. Eleanor responded with a nod and a faint smile, almost unconscious. Noah walked over, poured a fresh cup of coffee, then suddenly said, "The weather's beautiful today. Do you want to come with me to the olive grove? I need to take a few end-of-season shots." The question made Eleanor pause for a second. How long had it been since she last stepped past the wooden gate that led to the fields? How long had she been circling inside the house, between the kitchen and the window, letting time slowly gnaw away at what remained? "Yes," she said, softly like a drifting breeze. "I'll come." A simple answer, seemingly small, but in Noah's eyes it was like the first ray of sunshine after a long winter. He smiled brightly, like the first time Eleanor had heard him speak. They put on coats, wrapped scarves, and walked across the stone courtyard now darkened with moss, their footsteps echoing like an old song. The cold wind brushed their faces, but neither felt chilled. Beneath the slanted sun, their two shadows quietly passed through the weathered wooden gate. The threshold between a house and a field of memories now beginning to stir again. In the distance, rows of olive trees swayed gently in the wind, and Eleanor, after so many years, finally stepped back into life, not as the abandoned wife she had once been, but as a woman learning to breathe again. Beside her was a son, not born of her body, yet tied to her as if part of her own ribcage. The stone path leading from the old house to the olive grove twisted like an old memory, dotted with moss and scattered with dry pine needles. The morning air was so still that every step echoed into the quiet of nature, leaving Eleanor momentarily breathless. She couldn't remember the last time she had walked this way. Perhaps it was many years ago, when she was still searching for a reason to hold together a crumbling marriage. But today, ahead of her was Noah, the young man with his father's solemn face, but eyes entirely different. Those eyes were bright, capable of looking deep, and held a kind of gentle stillness. He stopped beneath a large olive tree where the light filtered through its leafless branches and spilled across the grass in soft, faded beams, like stained glass suspended mid-air. "Stand here, Mom," Noah said, lifting his camera, his eyes following the frame as if sketching a picture in his mind. "I want to capture this light. It's beautiful, and so are you." Eleanor gave a faint smile, unsure whether he was joking or sincere. Still, she stood quietly, her hand gently gripping the edge of her sweater, her gaze fixed toward the distant vineyard, where rows of gray wooden stakes stretched like a late-season choir. The sound of the shutter echoed, just a small noise, but it struck something deep inside her. Suddenly, Eleanor didn't feel like the woman who had endured years of silence and long solitary nights. In the lens of Noah's gaze, she saw herself again, not as a stepmother or the one left behind, but as someone alive. And did you know, Noah said after a few shots, that every time I photograph an empty scene, I imagine you in it, standing by a window, sitting on a wooden bench, or just a silhouette walking through the mist. Eleanor turned to look at him. There was nothing in his eyes but a disarming sincerity. She felt something stirring, not a feeling that crossed boundaries, but a depth of understanding that reached long-forgotten layers of emotion. She asked softly, "Why me?" Noah didn't answer right away. He lowered the camera, still looking at her. "Because you are the quietest part of my life." Eleanor turned away, her throat suddenly dry like she had just swallowed a breath of cold wind. She had never thought she could become the center of someone's world. Not after so many years of being a support, a background figure, or a nameless presence in someone else's story. Noah resumed taking photos. He didn't ask her to pose, didn't direct her. He simply captured her as she was, standing in silence among the wind, the fading olive trees, in a morning that seemed ordinary, yet stirred her heart in a very different rhythm. As the sunlight grew harsher, Noah lowered the camera and approached, offering her a small bottle of water. Eleanor took it, their fingers brushing gently. In that moment, neither spoke. Not because they didn't know what to say, but because neither dared to disturb the fragile stillness just beginning to take form, like the surface of a quiet lake, easily shattered by the drop of a single stone. Eleanor looked at Noah again. Beneath the gently swaying olive branches, he was no longer the boy from years ago, but a young man standing on the edge between youth and the solitude of growing up. Someone who could see her, not through duty or title, but through the full presence of who she truly was. And in that fleeting moment, Eleanor felt something inside her soften, as if she had just touched a light she thought had been lost long ago. That evening, Eleanor sat alone in the old stone kitchen, the warm yellow light casting a glow over the oak table, darkened by time. The wind tapped softly against the small window above the sink, carrying the scent of pine resin and the damp chill of the season's end. She was flipping through an old notebook, its pages filled with messy handwriting from the early years of her marriage, back when Tuscany was still a dream, not yet a place of refuge. Noah stepped in, holding a small box wrapped in silk paper, pale red like wine. He hesitated for a few seconds behind her, then spoke gently. "Mom, I have something I'd like to give you." Eleanor turned, surprise in her eyes. She couldn't remember the last time someone had given her a gift. Thomas used to bring flowers on her birthdays, until he stopped, and Noah never had. She accepted the box, her hands slightly trembling. "Is there something special today?" Noah shook his head, smiling softly. "No, I just felt today should be that kind of day." Eleanor peeled back the soft silk wrapping. Inside was a silver Italian bracelet, vintage in style with delicate links connected by a single smoky stone. Simple, elegant, yet holding more than just ornamental meaning. "Beautiful," she whispered, her fingers tracing the faint etchings. "I saw it at the Chianti market last month. I don't know why, but the moment I saw it, I thought of you." Noah stepped closer, taking the bracelet out of the box. "Let me help you put it on." Eleanor hesitated briefly, then offered her left wrist. Noah's fingers brushed her skin. Cold from the metal made her shiver. But the most vivid sensation was the warmth spreading from the place his hand touched hers. As he fastened the clasp, Noah didn't pull his hand away immediately. He stood very close, the scent of pine wood and sunlight clinging to his sweater. His breath touched Eleanor's neck as he whispered, "If we had met at another point in life, would everything still feel this complicated?" And the air froze. Eleanor felt her heart skip a beat. She wanted to pull her hand back, but couldn't find the strength. She didn't look at Noah, only stared at the gas flame on the stove, burning so small that if one didn't look closely, it might seem it wasn't there at all. "I'm sorry," Noah said quietly, stepping back. "It's just, sometimes it's hard to keep certain feelings locked inside forever." Eleanor slowly turned to face him. In his eyes, there was no impulse, no imagatory, only a deep sadness, a kind of emotion she never thought she would see in the eyes of someone she once cradled. "There are things that don't need to be said, Noah," she murmured, her voice low and soft like leaves falling on the porch. "I know," Noah replied. "Sometimes a moment of connection is enough to remind me that I'm not alone, even if it must stay in memory." Eleanor looked down at her wrist. The silver bracelet shimmered faintly under the light. A sign, an inscription, a gift, not for her, but for something deeper. A memory, a feeling, and a space that had never been named. She didn't say anything else, but as Noah went upstairs, his footsteps light as the wind, Eleanor knew one thing for certain. From that moment on, a door had been cracked open. And she, though still standing on this side of the line, had begun to hear the voice calling from the other. The night in Tuscany held a silence so profound it made one easily lost in thoughts better left unspoken. In the stone-tiled living room, the flickering flames from the fireplace cast shadows on the ancient brick walls, creating shifting patterns like memories. Eleanor sat on an old leather chair, a light blanket draped over her legs, her eyes quietly gazing out the window. The snow hadn't come yet, but the wind was already bitter. Noah appeared from the staircase, holding 2 glasses of red wine. Sangiovese, the kind they once bought from a small hillside winery. The orange glow from the fire made his hair shimmer, as if bathed in the final sunlight of the season. "Will you have a glass with me?" Noah smiled softly, setting one down on the table next to Eleanor. Eleanor nodded, saying nothing. They sat across from each other, the firelight dancing on their faces, one matured by years of silence, the other glowing with emotions never touched before. "I used to think," Noah said, gently swirling the wine in his hand, "this house would always stay as cold as it used to be." "And now?" Eleanor asked, her voice hoarse. "Seeing you walk through the fields today, under the autumn sun, I didn't feel cold anymore." Noah said it plainly, without hesitation. At that moment, I no longer saw someone from my past. I saw someone who had been quietly strong all along. Eleanor tightened her grip on the wine glass. Those words, so honest they were frightening. "Noah," she tried to keep her voice calm, "some things are meant to stay inside. I've kept it inside for too long, you know that." The air grew thick. Only the crackling of the wood and the rapid beating of Eleanor's heart echoed in the stillness. She knew. Just one more step, a return glance, a single touch, and something would cross a line that could never be undone. And then Noah did it. He stood, walked toward her. He didn't kiss her right away. He simply sat beside her, silently placing his hand over hers, as if asking. She should have pulled her hand away, but she didn't. She let it rest there, as though following some distant, unspoken instinct. "I don't know what this feeling is," Noah said softly, "but it scares me more than it comforts me." Eleanor turned to look at him. His face was so close she could see every flicker of his long lashes in the firelight. When his lips touched her cheek, soft, slow, almost weightless, she didn't pull away. She closed her eyes, as if hearing a sad song rising from within her. That silence between them stretched longer than it should, but no words followed, unsettling and quiet. A trail of red wine tipped over from the glass on the table, spilling onto the white tiles, like a sign that something had just slipped out of control. Eleanor opened her eyes and looked at Noah. She didn't smile, but she didn't speak either. Her lips parted slightly, as if to say, "Don't continue," but her eyes betrayed her. Noah understood. He reached out as if trying to hold on to a fleeting warmth, but Eleanor gently stepped back. Not rushed, not forceful, but carrying all the yearning both had never dared to acknowledge. Eleanor stayed still, overwhelmed by the weight of unspoken emotions neither of them fully understood, and in that moment all boundaries melted away. In the flickering firelight, Eleanor knew they had wandered too close to a place neither belonged, and now they both knew it. And sometimes, even silence can speak too loudly when left unanswered. The next morning, the first light of day filtered through the mystic glass, slanting into the old stone kitchen. Eleonora stood alone at the sink, a cold espresso cup in her hand. Outside, the bare vineyard trellises looked just like her heart at that moment, shriveled, empty, and exposed under the final thin sunlight of the season. There were no footsteps from the loft, no familiar good morning. The house was steeped in a terrifying silence, not the peaceful kind of Tuscany, but the kind that comes when someone has just lost themselves. Eleanor pressed her forehead against the cold refrigerator door and closed her eyes. Images from the previous night replayed in her mind like a blurred film reel. The flickering firelight, Noah's eyes looking at her not as a child anymore, and herself. Not resisting at all. No, she whispered, as if simply saying it aloud could undo everything. But there was no erase button for last night. She knew they had both gone too far from what should have been kept sacred. The sound of a door opening. Noah stepped in, his eyes unable to hide the exhaustion of a sleepless night. He looked at Eleanor for a long time, as if waiting for a word, a glance, or even the smallest gesture of comfort. Eleanor set the cup down, her voice hoarse and strangely calm. "Noah, you should leave for a few days." Noah froze. "Mom, it's not because I hate you," Eleanor continued, her voice steady but tightening. "It's because I need to remember who I am. And so do you." Noah took a step closer, eyes red. "We both know what we felt last night wasn't just an illusion. Some feelings arise from loneliness, not truth. That's why they must be let go before they change us." Silence filled the kitchen, the kind of silence where even a spoon dropping could make the heart ache. Noah said nothing more. He retreated quietly like a shadow,